Question 66. Few would deny that the idea of a human mission to Mars is exciting. Who is ready to pay for such an expedition? So, the second part of the sentence that I just read, who is ready to pay for such an expedition, is a standalone sentence. But right now we have an occurrence where the first part of the sentence, few would deny that the idea of a human mission to Mars, is also a standalone sentence, but you cannot combine two standalone sentences with just a comma. Therefore, no change isn't correct. We're going to have to choose an option that makes it so the first part of the sentence is a dependent clause rather than an independent clause. The only option that does that effectively is H. Although few would deny that the idea of a human mission to Mars is exciting, who is ready to pay for such an expedition? That, although few, introduces a dependent clause, whereas maybe a few, if any, are still leading way to an independent clause. So H corrects the sentence in the best way. 67. This is a startling number, especially in light of the fact that the International Space Station, the most ambitious NASA project yet, carried a projected price tag of only $17 billion. We have the part of the sentence right here, the most ambitious NASA project yet, is a non-essential clause, meaning it's not necessary. Therefore, it has to be set off by commas. We have a comma here, and we have a comma here. So this non-essential clause is already being set off by commas, so we don't have to do anything to the sentence. 68. The writer is considering adding the following true information to the end of the preceding sentence, placing a comma after station, with a final construction cost of $30 billion. Should the writer make this addition? This question isn't asking about grammar, it's just asking if the content should be added. And we already know that this paragraph talked about how NASA overspent a lot. They only planned to spend $17 billion, but they ended up overspending. This information lets us know how much they ended up overspending. So yes, we know that adding with a final construction cost of almost $30 billion would be effective. So we need to add it. But why should we add it? Because it strengthens the assertion made in the sentence by adding explicit detail, or because it proves spaceflight will be more affordable in the future. This sentence isn't doing the function that G is explaining, but it is adding explicit detail, as F is stating, so therefore F is correct. Question 69. One can only imagine if the final price of a human voyage to Mars would be. So, right now this sentence doesn't sound correctly. One can only imagine if the final price of a human voyage would be what? The if isn't connecting to a what idea that should be placed at the end of the sentence. Therefore, no change isn't correct. If we go down to D, it says delete the underlined portion. One can only imagine the final price of a human voyage to Mars would be what? We are left hanging. We don't know the conclusion of that sentence when the if is deleted. So A nor D are correct. One can only imagine what the final price of a human voyage would be. B, or the word what is functioning as the direct subject or the direct object of the sentence, and it allows us to understand what the sentence is saying. One can only imagine what the final price of the human voyage would be. If you flip the sentence, you could make it a question. The final price of a human voyage to Mars would be what? ? And we know that what makes sense. Question 70. Given that all the choices are true, which one most effectively describes what the Mars rovers are? So just to read the part of the passage that the question is referring to. In contrast, the two Mars rovers, robotic spacecraft launched in 2003, carried a combined price tag of less than $1 billion. Is this effectively describing what Mars rovers are? They are. They're adding detail that the Mars rovers are robotic spacecraft and that they were launched in 2003. But let's see if the other options add more detail, which captured the imagination of the general public, the products described at length in the media, familiar to many who watched the news coverage at the time. Neither G nor H nor J are adding detail or describing what the Mars rovers actually are. So we know that the sentence as is makes the most sense, adds the most detail to what Mars rovers are, so we don't have to change the sentence at all. So F is the correct answer. Question 71. These rovers are sophisticated pieces of technology with the capacity and ability to examine soil and rocks. This question is dealing with redundancy. Capacity and ability mean the same thing, and on the ACT and in standard English in general, that isn't necessarily allowed. So we know we will have to change the sentence, so A, no change, is not correct. Our options are genuine capacity, potential capacity, and capacity. This is one of the types of questions that makes you choose the really just the quickest answer. Which out of these options, genuine capacity, potential capacity, and capacity is the quickest option? D, it just capacity is all the information we need. These rovers are sophisticated pieces of technology with the capacity to examine soil and rocks. Although genuine capacity and potential capacity technically makes sense, that's just information and verbiage that we don't need. So capacity, concise, gets the meaning of the sentence across and is all we need. Question 72. Sending machines unaccompanied by humans to Mars does drain some of the romance out of aging or older. Question 72 is asking us to try to understand the idiomatic expression that the sentence is trying to say. Aging or older, it's trying to describe sending machines without humans as something that's been around for a long time. Aging or older isn't the correct idiomatic expression for that, and it also doesn't sound correct. Aging or older, that's not something you would hear in English or in English conversation. But if we go down to G, old age, sending machines unaccompanied by humans to Mars does drain some of the romance out of old age visions of space travel. Out of aging old visions of space travel. Out of age old visions of space travel. Age old is an idiomatic expression in English that means having been around for a long time. So it's kind of hard if you don't understand the idiomatic expression, or if English isn't your first language and you're not used to speaking it, to be able to get that question correct. But aging old, old age, and aging or older are just expressions in English that aren't said. Age old is the correct expression to have meant been around for a long time, which is the idea that the sentence is trying to get across. Question 73. In other words, we need to keep in mind that the right equipment can accomplish as much as any crew of scientists, if not more. The sentence is following the previous sentence, which is saying that some people are kind of against this idea of sending machines into space without humans. So in other words, sounds like sounds like the sentence that it is introducing is supporting the previous sentence, but that isn't so. It's introducing information that is in contrast to this, so A isn't correct. For that reason alone is also introducing information that would support the previous sentence, and C is doing that as well. So the only option that introduces, we need to keep in mind that the right equipment can accomplish as much as any crew of scientists, in a contrasting sense to the previous sentence, is even so. So I'll just read the two sentences together with the correct option within them. Sending machines unaccompanied by humans to Mars does drain some of the romance out of age-old visions of space travel. Even so, we need to keep in mind that the right equipment can accomplish as much as any crew of scientists, if not more. So reading those two together with the correct options substituted we are able to see that even so is the most correct answer. Question 74. Even so, we need to keep in mind that the right equipment can accomplish as much as any crew of scientists, if not more, such as a fraction of the cost. Well, a fraction of the cost is describing what using the right equipment can do. So such as a fraction of the cost, it's not adding an example, it's giving more detail. So we need to use at a fraction of the cost. That is also an idiomatic expression, at a fraction of the cost. You don't say such as a fraction of the cost. You don't say but only a fraction of the cost. You also don't say a fraction of the cost. G, at, effectively introduces the idiomatic expression at a fraction of the cost, and it also effectively gets across the idea that the sentence is trying to say. The last question, question 75, the writer is considering ending the essay with the following statement. With the passage of time, humans will continue to gaze in awe toward the heavenly skies as a source of inspiration and mystery. Should the writer end his passage or end their passage with this sentence? The option is no, because the essay so far has been about how scientists have been able to get to Mars and how they have been able to get around the cost of such expeditions. Saying with the passage of time humans will continue to gaze in awe toward the heavenly skies draws the readers away from the main point of Mars and the main point of the cost of sending humans there. We don't want to add that information because it wouldn't make sense in the context.